We have a very distinguished panel this morning. Some women we're so excited to welcome to the conference this year. I'm going to invite each of them up to the stage, and then I'll give you a little intro on each of them, and then we're going to get started with our morning panel. So first, we'd like to invite Nadege Green up to the stage. Hi, Nadege. We'll have you take a seat here. Yes, through the back. I'd also like to invite Natalie Bowden up to the stage, please. Round of applause for her. And Maribel Rodriguez, she's here with us this morning as well. Can we have her up here on the stage? Maribel is here from CBS 4. She's here for Liz Roldan. Liz Roldan was actually in the program, and she wasn't able to make it. She asked us to please address the audience and tell you how sorry she is. She's sick. Sometimes things happen. Liz is fantastic when it comes to leadership, and she has a very strong voice locally in the field and across the country. So although it's unfortunate, we're excited to have you here, Maribel. We're going to start welcoming you here. Maribel Rodriguez is the Emmy-nominated co-anchor of CBS 4 News this morning. She airs, along with her co-anchor, Monday to Friday from 4:30 to 7 a.m., so she wakes up long before I'm done my last streams. That's quite the shift. She began her career as a spokesmodel on the popular Univision television show Sábado Gigante, the longest running entertainment show in history, seen in every Spanish-speaking country in the world. After 6 years with the show, Maribel was lured away to become a feature and entertainment reporter for WPLG, that's Channel 10 here in the market. Her desire to discover hard news and uncover those stories persuaded her to make the switch to CBS 4 just a few months later. Maribel is pleased to volunteer her time with the Hispanic community. She was the Hispanic spokesperson for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MADD, in 2008. Florida International University named her Outstanding Alumni of the Year. In 2010, Maribel was inducted in the Miami-Dade College Foundation into the Alumni Hall of Fame under the journalism category. In 2016, she received the Journalist of the Year award from the Latin American Business Association, LABA. In addition, Maribel has received numerous other awards that attest to her professionalism and dedication to the business of the news. These honors reflect the way she's warm and engaging. Her personality really connects with the South Florida viewers. Born and raised in Miami to Cuban parents, Maribel has not forgotten her roots or the importance of her culture. A graduate from Florida International University, she holds a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism, and later this month, she'll be inducted into the Hall of Fame of the School of Communication and Journalism at FIU. Another round of applause for her. Raise the volume. Natalie Bowden, moving down the line here, is founder and president of Bowden, named one of PR Week's top 40 under 40 heavy hitters. Natalie has succeeded in building Bowden into an award-winning marketing communications agency, the agency winner of the 2017 Agency of the Year by HPRA. Her thought leadership guides the agency and helps companies including McDonald's, Target, Dish Network, and United Healthcare. And this really continues to drive the conversation, build community, and inspire culture leadership amongst diverse communities. Natalie's a regular speaker at industry conferences, including PRSA International, the Cultural Marketing Council, the Holmes Report, and PR Decoded. She is author in partnership with Quest Mindshare of the Latin Smart Purse, a qualitative and quantitative research analysis into the Latin consumer, and is also a regular contributor on Hispanic marketing to publications such as PR News, PR Week, and Media Post. Named Power Mom by Latina Magazine, Natalie is a graduate of Florida International University and a recipient of the university's Alumni Torch Award for outstanding leadership in the profession and in the Miami community. Another round of applause, please. We're pleased to welcome Nadege Green. She covers social justice issues and gun violence for WLRN, South Florida's NPR affiliate. Since joining WLRN, Nadege has reported on gun violence as a public health crisis, serial slumlords, police shootings in predominantly Black communities, and the restoration of rights for former felons. For her, journalism is all about seeking the voices we don't hear from and telling those stories too. Her work has received numerous awards, including a regional Edward R. Murrow Award. She received the first place investigative reporting award from the National Association of Black Journalists, and she's received several Florida AP Broadcaster Awards. In 2018, the Miami Foundation recognized Nadege with the Ruth Shack Leadership Award for her body of work that gives voice to communities that are not often heard. Green's reporting has appeared in the Miami Herald, NPR, and Public Radio International. A round of applause for her. Thank you for being here, Nadege. So ladies, this morning, thank you again for coming, and we're talking about this theme, women in communication shattering the ceiling. We're gonna start with each of you sort of giving us a couple words that you've prepared. So we'll just move down the line. Nadege, you wanna start for us, or we'll start the other way? Either way, we have a microphone up here for the, oh, you each have one, all right. So go ahead, Nadege.
Hi guys, I think this is on. I'm Nadege Green from WLRN. It's interesting when we talk about shattering the glass ceiling. I don't think I've shattered anything, to be quite honest with you. I don't come from a traditional journalism background, and it is not lost on me that Black women in particular are an anomaly in news media. Black women make up less than 5% of news media in general, whether you're talking about TV, print, or radio. And when we break it across gender in particular, in most media, it's about 30% white women, and then it just drops very steeply from there for women of color. And I think when we talk about gender, we have to address those disparities. And typically journalism, to be quite frank with you, is a type of career that means you have to have access, right? So you need to get internships for people to believe that you actually know how to do this. It costs a lot of money to take an internship in New York or Washington, D.C. if you don't have the means. So again, we can't talk about this without access to wealth and wealth disparity and how that looks when you show up in the workplace. So a big part of the type of journalism I do speaks to my background and where I come from. And I think it's important to have journalists in this space who speak to where we all come from, diverse voices in the media. Because you can tell when a story doesn't hit the mark. There have been so many times before I was a journalist where I would turn on the TV news or I'd read a newspaper and I'm like, y'all ain't get it right. Mm-hmm. This is not correct. You know, I'm fluent in Haitian Creole. I've seen many stories about the Haitian community. I'm like, oh, you didn't speak Creole. Because people will tell you, like, I don't speak English. They do, but they only speak English to you if they're comfortable. Same thing in Spanish, right? You know, it's like, I have to build trust with you. I have to understand you before I can open up to you. And a lack of that in news media means that the stories we tell are not always complete. And so I try to use my role as media to amplify those voices that are often ignored. People call them voiceless. I push back on that. People are not voiceless. We don't give voice to anyone. They can speak and they've been speaking. It's just a matter of whether or not we choose to ignore them. So a big part of the platform at WLRN has been to amplify the voices that typically mainstream media is happy to just kind of cast to the side unless your community is on fire.
We're going to dig into a lot of that, but first we're going to move on with the opening remarks. Natalie, why don't you take it from here?
Super. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Very excited, and thank you, Lillian, for inviting us. We were told to talk about shattering the glass ceiling. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't want to talk about shattering the glass ceiling. You know, screw the glass ceiling. I was going to say the F word, but I wasn't going to be invited back if I did. So I thought, well, if I have 5 minutes, because I'd like to spend 5 hours here, what is it that I could really bring to the table? And instead of talking about shattering the glass ceiling, I'd like to talk in these 3-4 minutes about ambition. Ambition, because it's ambition that's going to get us through challenges. And it's ambition that is that fire that you have, as many of you have here as students. I was born and raised in Honduras, and my grandmother has this funny story. She says that I sat on the corner of the bus stop when I was about 8 years old and sold lemonade. My mom laughed that it was all profit because she paid the lemons, I didn't pay for the water, I didn't even pay for the manpower, right? But I was selling lemonade. And she said, Natalie, you would not leave until you made a few sales. That's ambition, okay? And when I came to the US, I'm actually an FIU graduate. 20 years ago this May, I graduated. I graduated with a degree in English literature. I studied under Dr. Sutton, he's fantastic, but I could not find a job. Okay, I was on an OPT visa, which gives you a year to find a job here as a foreigner, and I couldn't find a job. I applied to journalism jobs. I would have loved to have had that job. That's the job that, no one, English teacher, communications, nothing, but I did not stop. From about 9 o'clock in the morning to 4, I worked, I remember. And from 4 to 7, I looked for a job until I got one. I got an internship first, then I got an $18,000 a year job. I was rich. And then I got my first job at a global agency. And that time, 8 people interviewed me, and they didn't give me the job. So I wrote back to them. The name of the file was Do Not Quit. I remember the name of the file. And I said, just give me a chance. Just give me a chance. And the HR head of that agency, who's still there, said, you know what, Natalie, you were so politely persistent. I don't think I was politely persistent. Jodía. Jodía hasta el punto que me dieron el trabajo. They gave me the job. But that's ambition. Ambition is getting my first job, my first client at $500 a month. Ambition was then saying, you know, screw these small clients, let's go for the big guys. And we went after the big guys and we got them. That's ambition. And what I would love is that one day someone says the glass ceiling, and then someone says, what the hell is a glass ceiling? Is that an architectural term? What is that? Because we cannot continue talking about the glass ceiling. It's only going to get bigger. We really need to talk about ambition. So, you know, that I'd like to end with that, and of course, happy to answer any questions afterwards. But it's, you know, those are the moments that are key. That ambition, and as women too, right? Ambitious, and she's pushy. Ay, no, she no cae mal, right? A man's ambitious. Excuse all the gentlemen in here, and that's what he has to do. So I think if we continue to fuel our ambition and the ambition of those around us, then we're going to shatter that glass ceiling. No one's going to talk about the glass ceiling anymore.
Wonderful. We're going to get back to that. And I think you make an excellent point, Natalie, because it really is about that inner drive and that ambition. Nobody's going to promote you the way you promote you, right? I think that's what we're trying to get to here. Maribel, we'll have you take it from here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's good afternoon for me. I've been up since like 3 o'clock in the morning. So if I doze off a little bit, just wake me up. No, I won't do that.
This is the end of your day. This is the end of your day.
Oh, no. I can talk about my day. It goes on forever. I'm also here. I'm very excited to be here again, filling in for my amazing news director, Liz Roldan. Again, she says that she's so sorry she could not be here today. She has a flu. She's in bed. So I am happily here for her, back to be here at FIU. Aside from my bio that was just read, I want to add, I am 46 years old. I have 3 children. I've been married for 22 years. My first and only husband, and I've been in the business just as long as I have been with him. So when they say you can't have a family, you can't have a husband, I'm here to say you could have it all. There's a balance in life, and you can work with that balance. I always say, I didn't do it on my own. I have a village that helps me. My husband says, you have to ask for help because I want to do it all. And in the beginning, I wanted to do everything. I wanted to be the perfect wife. I wanted to be the perfect mother. I wanted to be in school, taking the cupcakes and then running and then going to the station and then getting the interview and then going to sleep at God knows what time, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning again, and I was exhausted. And then once I started asking for help and realizing that I can't do everything and everything's not going to be perfect, then it's okay. If my kids go to school with, their shoes are dirty, it's fine. If I buy the cupcakes in Publix and I don't make them myself, it's okay. And if I give them money and I say, here, can you please buy the cupcakes because I can't, that's fine. So I'm done feeling guilty. I got over that many years ago, so I am so happy, and I'm here to say you can have it all, but ask for help. Also, as you were saying, be persistent and don't take no for an answer. I went through that a lot. I started my career as a model. I worked in Sábado Gigante while I was here at FIU. After 6 years, I was lucky enough to be given the opportunity to work at Channel 10 as an entertainment reporter. So it was an easier transition to go from an entertainment show, if you were aware of that show, to being in entertainment, sort of. But a lot of people, when I walked in, they were like, oh, there's that little model coming in, or, oh, she got the job because, she was a model. Or, no, like, I came to FIU, I studied, I paid my dues, so I felt that I had to work even harder. I had to prove myself even more. They're saying, oh, she's got an accent. I'm from Miami, this is how I talk. I don't have an accent. But, I tried to make it better. Until this day, I keep working on myself to make myself better. You learn something every single day. We talked about being stagnant, not staying. I learned things from my interns that are coming in, teaching me about social media, which I have to learn so much about. But you learn every single day. So I know I'm like talking about everything, but there's so much I want to talk about. And but yeah, I'm just happy to be here. And remember, all the women out there, and the men too, because I have the most amazing husband who I could not do it without him. So you could have a family, you could have you could have a husband, and you can have it all. I think you could, as long as you have a balance and find that balance.
We'll start with you, actually, Maribel, because you touched upon a couple things I wanted to bring before the panel this morning. We talked about earlier this idea of having mentors and women lifting women, but sometimes the gender issues we see are amongst ourselves, and we've seen it in television. I mean, you kind of hinted at it. So this notion or this idea that you have to be very smart, and if you look a certain way, you must not be so smart. And sometimes as women, instead of lifting each other up, we're criticizing each other. Can you weigh in on that? We'll start with you first.
Oh yeah, I went through a lot of that. Not so much in news, but in the entertainment and the television show. And then when I went on to news, it was a whole different story. It was very different because the women that were there, and I am so thankful for them, they came and they helped me right away. And I learned so much from them that now I, in return, am helping other women and I don't feel intimidated by them. As a matter of fact, I feel more empowered by helping them. It also helps me at the same time. So I don't think we're seeing that as much now because there's a lot of women empowering women. And in this business, I think that we all have to stick together and help each other. Yeah.
So, Natalie, we'll have you weigh in on that if you don't mind. So just this notion of the gender issues that we're going to be discussing this morning, and let's take it up with each other first.
It's a really good question. The question of voice is important. Because you're the one that's going to have to lift yourself up. There's something called, and many of you might have heard it, imposter syndrome, where you're in a place and you're like, I don't know how, I shouldn't be here. There are many more people much more intelligent than me. Oh my God, I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. If you're there already, there's a reason you've been chosen to be there. And we tend to have this a ton, thinking that we're not supposed to be there. That is something that we need to quiet. You have to quiet that voice. You're there, and there might be people that are older than you, but you're there. In terms of women lifting women, that Madeleine Albright quote is fantastic. There's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women, and it's true. I tell you, you have to find a place where women are at the top, right? The organization, whether it's a nonprofit or whether it's a news outlet or an agency, take a look. Who's at the top? Are they diverse? Are they not? Because that means they got there on talent, right? Not on, there was no glass ceiling. So I think that's important. Those two things, like quiet that voice that's telling you you can't, and then join an organization where you already see that the women are at the top.
Good. Nadej, we'll have you pick up from here.
I don't think I've experienced like intergender issues in any kind of significant way in the workplace. For me, I think women have always centered me in the workplace and like have always been really supportive because like we're all we got. So like I worked at the Miami Herald for 7 years. I covered city government. I covered the city of Miami. It's a very male-centric beat. I think I was probably like one of 2 women over time that covered that beat like over like a 10-year period. It's usually a guy who covers city government. But I know within the newsroom, I had champions who were all women for the most part. I had like maybe 2 male mentors in the newsroom, but all of the people who helped show me the ropes and show me the behind the scenes on like how do you do this, how do you get to understand this, people like Jacqueline Charles, the Caribbean correspondent there, or you know Carol Marvin Miller who covers DCF and she's on the investigative team. Like they all take you under their wings. Regardless of whether or not you got there 2 years ago, a month ago, you didn't have to be like important. The news is very interesting in that you don't earn your stripes until you tell certain types of stories. But these women didn't view me in that way, right? I didn't have to have like a front page story yet for them to consider that I was worth investing in. And now I work at WLRN where it's actually predominantly woman newsroom. We actually joke a lot with the guys.
It's a theme we're seeing, I guess, because we've talked about,
It is mostly women at WLRN, and yeah, we run it, so.
Nadej, I have a bit of an issue with something, Nadej, I have a bit of an issue with something that you said this morning, though. You said you haven't shattered any glass ceiling, and I totally disagree. Your work, fantastic, not just because of the awards, but because of the access you have and the time you've invested as a journalist within the communities you report on. I have a question for the entire panel, but I want to start with you. How do you perceive, Nadej, that glass ceiling? And if it doesn't exist, why not? But if it does, how do you define it, I guess?
I say I didn't shatter a glass ceiling. Just because I exist in this space doesn't mean I shattered something, right? I'm definitely taking up space, and my voice will be heard in the space that I'm in. I'm not going to shy away, and nor do I downplay my accomplishments and the stories I tell. I absolutely own that those stories are important to tell. However, when I look around media, and I go to a general media conference like IRE, investigative reporters and editors, and I'm the only Black woman, a glass ceiling was not shattered. Right. When I show up in spaces, even in Miami as a journalist, and I tell this story a lot because it is real for me, I show up to crime scenes all the time because I cover gun violence, and other media, my peers, will look at me when I show up to Liberty City, and they'll come to me and they're like, can you tell us about your friend who got shot? Can you tell us about your sister who, can you tell it? Because their perception of me is that I'm not one of them, that I'm not their peer, that I could not be a journalist. And I ask, well, why is that?
So you're saying you have other journalists trying to interview you when you're on assignment in the field?
I'm in a Black neighborhood.
Wow.
I'm the person that because I smile, I guess I'm a friendly face in the crowd. But this happens so many times that I've actually tweeted about it, and I hashtag reporting while Black. So I push back on, I didn't shatter a glass ceiling. Right. Up until that I am considered valid where I am, and that I'm not the only, then the glass ceiling has not been shattered.
So what you're saying is that you recognize your presence in the space, and you're proud of it, but you feel that it's not there yet.
Having representation of one person does not mean you've accomplished anything. Right. One is not enough. I think we like to play with words. We like diversity and inclusion, and because they're buzzwords and they sound nice, but one is not enough. Like, what does it mean to have access to spaces, right? What does it mean to be able to have equitable access to opportunities like internships? Right. Like, who gets those opportunities? Because that's the pipeline that leads you to these jobs. Right. How much do you get paid compared to your peers? Right. Like, those are the things that I think about glass ceiling that I think about, because I'm also a single mom with 2 kids. I have to make sure these little humans survive, right? And you're also thinking about long term, like what does it mean to build wealth? What does it mean to exist in this space? Not just exist, but thrive. Because so many women leave this industry after they have children. Most of the journalists that I know, especially in newspapers, after they have kids, they leave, and they come back when their kids are like 16, 17 years old. But taking that gap, what does that mean for your outcome in this industry compared to a man who is able to now say, like, I've been in this for 15 years, when you take that 5-year break, that 10-year break, that absolutely impacts your outcome. like for me, a glass ceiling has not been shattered if you have to take 10 years off of your career in order to exist. So yeah, I push back on that. No, there's no glass ceiling that's been shattered here. But I'm here in this space, and you will hear my voice in this space.
So Nadege, it's not only about your perceived success, but you want to see others around you sort of helping you confront some of these
I
challenges.
just want to see us reflected, right? I want to see us reflected in media. I want to see our different experiences reflected in media.
Right.
And not just people telling the stories, but the decision makers, right?
Right.
Who are the corporate mastheads, like because we need representation there as well.
Right.
And so I think we have a ways to go. I'm not going to be deluded, and I'm not going to pretend that we have arrived. I mean, we've come some way, but from 2013 to before, the number of Black journalists in newsrooms dropped significantly by 40%. So we actually went down, not up.
Really? Wow, that's an interesting stat. Natalie, we're going to have you weigh in on this idea of the glass ceiling.
Yeah, Nadege makes a great point. The glass ceiling is some of those those elements that are already part of our structure that doesn't allow a mother to continue to work at the news station because it's just impossible. It's those small things. If you have a company that's not structured in a way that when somebody gives birth, they don't have the ability to go on maternity leave, what are you going to do? Choose between your child and your job. You say, oh, you know what? I have to take time off and figure it out and tap into savings. So the glass ceiling is that you need to have that maternity leave in place. You need to have some sort of flexibility. We had a mom at the office that said, told me once, I just want to go home and hug my baby. I have 3 children. I know what that's like. I said, go home. That's after she had come back from maternity leave, right? She had started to transition back in. Said, go home. There are companies that just don't allow that. No, you have to stay here till 6. So you have to sit. That is the glass ceiling. Right. I was hearing Secretary of State Clinton speak on I have to find the title of what I was watching yesterday. It'd be great for everyone to watch it. I think it's Gender Imbalance Explained, something like that. But she said something very interesting. She said, a man, when he has pictures of his family in his office, it's, he's a provider. A woman has pictures of her family in the office, oh, she's not concentrating on her job. Those little things that people might think, male and female, that's the glass ceiling, and that's what we have to start getting rid of. And we can't get rid of by saying, we'd like to give you that promotion. It's that promotion and the flexibility that I need to go home and breastfeed at 2 p.m. and then come back.
Right.
Right? And I formed a company because I didn't see it out there 20 years ago. I'll tell you a really quick story, then you have to grab the mic from me and not talk forever. Quick story. I walked into my boss's office. This is... what year was this? I don't remember exactly the year. I was 25 or so. But I walked in and I said, listen, Jorge, I got a business lead, right? And this is the managing director at one of these big agencies. And I said, I got a business lead. And he was there with the VP, who was also my boss. And I said, I found this is .com, the .com days, that I met the CEO. He's looking for public relations services. I thought I was going to get a pat on the back. That's fantastic. Who is he? And the VP turned to me and said, are you sure it wasn't your shirt that caught his attention?
Jeez.
I was like, what? So I said, I remember feeling frightened and then saying, maybe I should have a word with HR about this. But I was, like we say in Honduras, I was like this. I was nervous as the boss. I didn't find it there. I didn't see women at the top. So I said, I'm going to form my own company, and it's going to be equality for everyone. But yeah, that's the glass ceiling. When you make a comment like that and someone makes a comment back and you're like, what? ¿Qué tiene que ver? It's got absolutely nothing. Of course, that's sexual harassment, et cetera, but that's got nothing to do with what I just said.
With what's at hand, right? You talk about becoming a leader and positioning yourself as a leader because you wanted to sort of create a culture that doesn't accept that.
Right. That is absolutely, and you said it beautifully, that is absolutely unacceptable. And I tell you something, it still happens today.
Right.
There was a gentleman that I interviewed the other day for an SVP position. This is a 6-figure salary, tons of benefits. And that role is to come in and build a new book of business. at least $1 million more for the agency, et cetera. It's got some really specific business objectives. This guy's a big wig. He was at a big agency in China, managed a P&L of like 50 million, et cetera, et cetera. And then his thank you back to me, like, I'm interviewing him, right, for the job at my company. You're not allowed. His thank you was this much thank you, guys, and this much how I had to fix the design of our door of the office. I don't care about the door. So those are little glass ceiling things. Like, he would not have said that to a CEO that is not a female. You want to hear, this is how I'm going to build your business. These are the contacts that I have, right? That's the glass ceiling.
Right.
And you are right. I mean, we haven't shattered it. But I stick to my guns that we have to stop, like, talking about certain things, certain words, right? We have to talk about ambition and how we're going to get there. But those are the little things that continue to happen.
Right, and sometimes I think an important thing you said or touched on is it might not be overt, but even the subtlety of it means it still exists, right?
Absolutely exists.
So, Mariba, we'll have you take it from here.
I would just say having balance in your life, priorities. Again, I keep talking about my kids because once I had that, my life totally changed and my priorities totally changed. When I first started in the business, it was work, and that was it. I didn't care if I worked 2 shifts, if I worked in the morning, they asked me to come at night, and back and forth, because I felt that I had to prove myself. In the beginning, it was fine, it was okay. But then once I had my children, my priorities changed, and that's okay. So once that happened, and I realized, okay, it's okay, I can do it, then also to be true to myself. And I had many mentors throughout my career. They were mentors, but I always remembered who I was, where I came from, and the way that I am. And I don't think I've changed because of where I am now. I think I'm very grounded, and I haven't wanted to imitate anyone. I am Maribel Rodriguez. I am not Barbara Walters. I never wanted to, well, I did aspire to be her, but I wouldn't imitate her. I am myself. When I am on the anchor desk or when I'm reporting, it is my words, it is the way that I express myself is who I am. If I want to speak with my hands, when I'm on the desk, I don't have to stay stiff because it's who I am. Be unique. Don't try to imitate anyone else. And I think that's why I'm still where I'm at today, because I'm true to myself. My values are the same. My morals are the same. I've learned how to say no, and I've learned how to stay grounded. And I think that is so, so, so important. Never burn any bridges. I've never stepped on anyone's toes to get to where I am today. I've helped people along the way. They've helped me. And I think just having a combination of it's kind of like a melting pot. I think that's my glass ceiling with lots of things in there. But yeah, I think that, that's what has helped me keep my sanity and keep me balanced and where I am today.
So you all touched on something that we're going to attack next. So children, I just had one. He's brand new. He's about this big. Almost 13 pounds. But, I had a lot of fears associated with, A, will I ever have a family when I was a younger reporter? And then with B, when I am pregnant, how will I be on the air pregnant? How will this go? What will people think? And to be honest, even though intellectually I knew that it was okay, I was nervous to tell my news director that I was having a baby. And you know what? She was so happy and so supportive. But I feel that I created this in my head. But the reason we're going to bring it up is because things do change, as you said, Maribel. And you talked, Natalie, we'll start with you about saying, yeah, go home if you need to go home and hug your baby. Having that compassion as a female leader for other women who become mothers, because everything does change.
Oh my God, Stephanie, I could speak for 10 hours about motherhood. And,
I'll keep an eye on the time, but.
Keep me honest. I have 3 children. I have a 14-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 3-year-old. The cool thing about having running your own company and being able, there's some things I can decide and some things I can't. I always like to say people think you're the boss and that you decide everything. No, there are many people that work for the company that they get to decide, right? And I get to fund it. But the culture, I can definitely decide upon what kind of culture we want. And I didn't have maternity leave with number one. I didn't have maternity leave with number two because I was forming the agency. I laugh with this story because one of my clients who was in Atlanta, I was on a call with him when Seb was just born. He must have been about 2 or 3 weeks old. And I forgot to put the mute button because I would give my updates, right? And then I'd put mute. He's crying or he's pooing or I'm breastfeeding or something, right? Forgot to put mute. And Seb cried like, wah. And then I didn't mind, it was on mute when the vice president of this company said, what was that? Oh my God. I said, that's my vice president. Natalie, you're pregnant? Wait, you had a child? Because I couldn't, I had to continue work. But she didn't even realize it. I don't want anyone to go through that. You need time to rest. But I don't know if I'm answering your question. What can I answer about
I think when that happens, we notice this change, but it doesn't mean our career goals change. And I think this is what I'm getting. It doesn't mean that we change as professionals, but our personal life and our professional life is intertwined inevitably.
Look, I always like to say, people say working mothers. Everyone's a working mother, whether you stay at home or you go to work outside of home. Women can decide to stop work. Right, I'd like to start if they can, and they can be at home, or they can decide to do the balance. But you've got to find a place of work that'll be able to give you that. But your dreams don't have to. Your dreams can change. Your dreams are maybe for your children, or your dream is to continue in your career. But yes, if you are career focused, nothing needs to change. It shouldn't change. Not in the workplace. If you were going to get promoted, you should get promoted. You know, I used to go with Seb to the newsrooms. I didn't have any help, so I'd take him to the newsrooms, or I was this pregnant at like McDonald's Leadership Summit. I mean, it really depends what you want to do.
Right.
But you have to have a place of work that gives you that ability to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, Nadege, we'll bring you in here.
Sure, I'm all about disrupting systems, and so I don't think it's just necessarily about motherhood. I think it's about family compassion, because I honor the women who don't have children for whatever reason as well. But it's very well that you may not have children, but you have an aging parent who all of a sudden you need to care for differently, who has Alzheimer's, or just need a little bit more help than normal, and so they fell down and you need to call them. Like, I feel like you can create a system where all of that lives, where it honors motherhood, it honors the fact that you have an elderly parent, it honors the fact that maybe you are a big brother or a big sister, and your little sister is in crisis as a foster kid, and you need to show up for them. Like, there are different ways we have to show up for people in emergency situations that aren't just your children, that are still valid, and I think that workplaces should still honor and make room for. And again, I don't think we have to name it around whether or not you gave birth to a child or have a child yourself, because even for first-generation immigrant, folks in the workplace, there's a good chance. Like for me, my mom is fluent in English, like working, like regular language. But if she has an appointment with a specialist and there's not a translator there, guess who has to go on that appointment with her? Right? Like there needs to be space for that in workplaces to actually honor your family commitments, those commitments that exist. And I think you can have that. You can actually create those systems. Like it doesn't have to be like one and done.
So in the context of what you're saying, do you think women as nurturers take on those roles more, or do you think that it's perceived that we do, or vice versa?
That we do, and definitely this would definitely affect women, but it would affect men too.
Absolutely.
Just the women in the workplace can do this, right?
Yeah.
It would be a policy.
Right.
And everyone has access to this thing. Mm-hmm. But like I see it all the time. I have coworkers at the Herald who have aging parents. Right. And it's like, yeah, you have to take care of them. You have to move them in sometimes with you. I'm of Caribbean descent. We take our old in, and they stay with you. So like all of those things can help, and that informs how you show up at work. Because if you have anxiety about whether or not you can get to your parent or be able to get to your child so you can feed them, I remember like having the police called on me once at City Hall, because someone thought I was doing something weird. I was just pumping my boobs for the baby. But I was sitting in the back seat of my car, and of course I got all these wires from the front seat you gotta plug in, but it's more comfortable from the back seat. And I must have looked like I was doing something questionable, building a bomb. I don't know. But like a city of Miami police officer like knocked on my car window. And like I took all of my breast pumping stuff into City Hall when I go into City Hall because it can go bad in this heat. And that machine is very expensive. But he knocks on the door and I like roll down the window and he's like, "Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Nothing to see here, just, milk for baby." And he was like, "Oh my God." I'm like, "Don't be weird, you can't see anything." But like,
Mother Nature at work, right?
we do what we have to do is my point. Like if you're able to exist in these spaces, if jobs give you the leeway that you need to do the things you need to do, then you're actually a more effective employee, I find. I think you're more effective. I think you're more productive. People say don't talk about your children at job interviews. When I left the Miami Herald, I actually led my interview at WLRN with, "I got kids."
Right.
And I want to know what flexibility looks like. I want to know whether or not I'm able to work remotely and those sorts of things. And I was able to craft out my needs, most of which were met. And sometimes I find you just have to ask, because often we feel like it won't be received. Now that said, there are workplaces that may just shut that down and you could lose a job for that, right? But that was a risk I was willing to take at that point because I was like, I have children.
Right.
And so I am lucky that I have the type of, my kids live at WLRN. One just recorded a radio spot for us. Like, "I'm Jacob Green. You're listening to 91.3 FM. You may hear him on the radio soon."
You're grooming the talent early, I see.
And it was spring break. What do you do with children on spring break? I'm like, I take them to work with me. Our VP of news knows that he has to babysit them sometimes if I have to go track in the studio. But I make them very much a part of what I do because they are. Like, I can't pretend that they don't exist because they do.
Right.
And the same thing for if I had an Asian parent, it might be take your mom to work day. Like, "Mom, you coming with me?" And that is right. In fact, I have taken my mom to work. But I think creating those spaces where it's welcoming, or creating those spaces so that your staff can talk to you about these things, I think would make a more productive workforce across the board.
A very good point. Maribel, we'll have you kind of weigh in on this.
Everything they said, I totally agree with that.
You're there nodding
I
and
started
smiling.
talking about my kids. I keep talking about, no. Yeah, absolutely. But I just think, obviously, where you work is very important because there are some bosses that may not understand that you have to go take your mom to the doctor. They may not understand. So I think from the very beginning, you have to not set your rules, but say, this is what I have. As you mentioned, I have kids, or my mom lives with me. And don't be afraid to ask. It's like, I've asked my boss before, "Hey, Liz, can I leave early today? I got something, at the kids' school." And I'll make it up for it. It's, again, like I always say, it's a balance. It's a balance. And also, I think, I'm not a boss, but I am so fortunate that I've had amazing bosses that understand. So I think that's what's made my job a lot easier, and I'm still where I am today because of them. Because you can be a great employee, but if you don't have a great employer, it makes life very difficult. So,
I add one thing.
Of course.
Just thought of one thing because you made a really good point. Accumulating wealth is something that is a bit taboo for us to talk about as women more than men. But I tell you something, remember this for all the young women that are in here. You heard some of the sacrifices that I went through, right? You don't ever want that. You don't want to not take maternity leave, etc. But there are a lot of sacrifices that I went through. We had no help. I had a $500 a month client. Christian, my husband, was making about $40,000 a year at that point as a tennis coach. So I really didn't know what the hell we were really going to do when Seb was born, because I was pregnant with Seb at the time. But I put my foot on the pedal. I kept on putting my foot on the pedal. And today, we have help that comes in at 7 in the morning, and we have help that leaves at 2, and someone else that comes and then leaves at 8. I want to be transparent because people say we do it all, and sometimes we just have a lot of help. I've been able to build a business in such a way to be able to afford help. And I can leave the business too. Many days I'll leave at 3 o'clock and do the whole run with the kids, picking them up. That would not have happened had I taken my foot off the pedal then. I don't think it would have happened. So there are some benefits to saying, all right, they're young, the kids are very young, but I'm going to continue doing X because when they're 6 or 7 or 8, I might pull back a little bit.
Right.
My son was diagnosed with Crohn's disease 2 years ago, and at that point, you don't ever want to be told that your son or daughter has a lifelong disease. But at that point, I also didn't come to work for about 30, 35 days because we were traveling the country trying to find the best doctors for him. I was always connected, but I wouldn't have been able to do that nor give him the best hospitals had I not had my foot. I wasn't thinking that when I was exhausted pulling in 24, all-nighters and then working all day. So there's something to just, to keeping your foot on the pedal even when you have your first children.
Right. In the theme of what we're discussing, that to shift focus a bit, shattering the glass ceiling, let's talk about power dynamics. We've shared throughout the course of the morning experiences where we've had females in leadership roles that we've looked up to. I've had more female news directors than male news directors actually throughout my career. Nadege, you talked about not really feeling in your newsroom that men are making the decisions. When they are, though, and when they have, and when they may continue to, let's talk about those power dynamics and any stories you might want to share. We could start with you, Natalie, where you kind of felt that there was something at play that had strictly to do with gender, whether it was intimidation, whether it was a belittling, but let's talk about that because those are the things we're really here to attack and to make disappear eventually.
Honestly, my answer is very short because ever since I had that experience that I told you about, I sure it wasn't your shirt bit,
Right.
it's been uphill since then because I started to form a company that as you said, all of that is unacceptable. I'm trying to think from the client perspective. If you see power dynamics, the cool thing at the moment in terms of where we are as a really, I feel, I don't want to make a political statement, but there's a lot of women empowerment at the moment, right? There's a lot, ever since Me Too, our voices are even louder and louder and louder. So I feel there's less and less and less of that. But again, I'm coming from a place of work. I don't feel that, and nobody else feels it. So I don't know if we're living in a little cocoon, you know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So I don't have another example other than that one time. Granted, I got a text the other day from an agency that wanted to partner with us, and even the text was, I won't even go into it, but you could see the gender. I can't go into it. I can't. But you could see the gender play there. But yeah, I don't have much to add.
Right. What about you, Maribel? Do you have anything to add?
I honestly don't think that, I'm sorry. I honestly don't think that in news, I've seen it as much because in the news business, there are a lot of women. Like, for instance, right now on our morning show, we're 3 women, 2 female anchors. Weather is also female. So I think this is the first time that they've had 3 women together in the morning show. And it's not only at our station, I've seen it at other stations as well. So I really haven't been in a situation where it's like, oh, no, you're a woman. I could say back 20 years ago when I did begin in the business, I did see it more. Now, not as much. That, I think we're just as equal.
And so you've seen a change or a transition, so to speak?
I've seen a big change. Also, I worked in the Hispanic market, which was very different. That was 20 years ago. When I moved into the general market, into the American market, it was also very different. In the Hispanic market, I think I saw it a little more than where I am right now.
Right. Nadege, did you want to weigh in?
Can I say
Yeah.
one thing? We're very lucky, talking about Hispanic, to live in this country. I tell you that much. Because if you're talking about Latin America,
Right.
the last time that I did a brainstorming for a group of CEOs in Latin America, I asked them to put up photos of things that no longer exist. We were doing a rebranding. And they put up, one of them went up and put a small store in the countryside, like una trucha that they say in Honduras. And I said, why did you put that up? It's like a woman in the kitchen. She doesn't even exist anymore. What happened? Woman in the kitchen. You would never hear that here in the U.S.
No.
They all laughed and giggled.
Right.
We're living in good times, I find.
I think it's not necessarily the most blatant stuff, right? It's not that someone's going to come up to you and say something crazy. I think most people know not to say crazy stuff, and sometimes they do. But I think it's really looking at things like pay transparency. Do you get paid the same as your male colleagues? There's a good chance that they never tell you how much everyone gets paid.
You don't.
But you don't, right? And we know this through a number of studies across communications, media, and every other field, right? That women get paid significantly less than men. That is a gender issue in newsrooms and in communications. So I don't think it's necessarily the most transparent stuff where it's like, someone is harassing you. I think there's still some of that. And also as a journalist, I'm in the field a lot, so I don't have to hang out in the newsroom. So most of the outwardly stuff sexual harassment or the microaggressions of what it means to be a woman in certain spaces exists outside of the newsroom, but I have to interact with it, whether it's in City Hall, which is a very male-centric environment, with lobbyists. There was a lobbyist once in a city that I covered, who called me princess all the time. And I remember it was a council meeting, and I had enough. And he texted me during the meeting and was like, "I see you're here, princess. It's so good to see you." And I'm really big at putting people on blast. So when necessary, I'm happy to pull aside if there's a relationship there. But in this case, I was fine to blow up this relationship. And during the council meeting, there's always a break because they go on forever, and we're in the hallway where everyone is standing around. And I addressed him very loudly. I was like, "Can you please stop calling me princess? And can you stop texting me princess during the council meetings?" And all of a sudden he was mortified. He was trying to tell me to whisper. And I was like, "No, I don't want to whisper. I want you to stop calling me princess during the council meetings." But he was embarrassed that other people heard what he was doing. So it was very intentional. What you're doing is wrong. So we have those teaching moments out in the field. Or, there's some politicians who think that because you're very young appearing, I get that a lot. People think I'm super young, and I am, for the record.
Super. Me too.
Super young. But my kids don't think so. They think I'm really old. But they'll underestimate me, right? They'll think that, oh, she's not, she doesn't really know her stuff. She doesn't really know this because she's young, or she's pretty. And I'm happy to actually go with that. I'm happy to be underestimated because, when the stories come out, then it's different. When I started covering one city, they were like, "Oh, we heard about you." I'm like, "Oh, guess we can't work this trick, But that, I think that is part of it. But especially in journalism, I'll push back on, there is absolutely clear gender issues in journalism, especially when you talk about what we cover. The investigative teams in journalism, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, whether it's newspaper, is the most prominent group, and it is the most regaled group in news. How do you be an investigative reporter? And who gets to be investigative reporters? Look at I-teams. They are disproportionately made up of white men. Very few women are on those I-teams. What would it mean to have more women doing investigations? And what type of investigations would we see from journalism as a result of that? What would it mean to have more people of color doing investigations? And what kind of investigations would we see as a result of that in newsrooms? I think that is a huge area of opportunity for journalism. In fact, the Ida B. Wells organization is an organization founded by Black investigative journalists to build that pipeline, because we love to say there's no pipeline. Oh, well, it's not that we're not looking, we just couldn't find the right candidate. And we're here to tell you, but we're here. What do you mean you can find us? We're right here. And we're also journalists. We are actually trained in finding people. But when it comes to finding diverse people, it's oh, we can find one. Most journalism jobs are not advertised. They're through word of mouth. So if your network only looks like you, then who gets the job?
Right. You touched upon a couple things that I want to circle back to, but just to kind of back up with stats, when you talked about salaries, so the last national survey conducted by the Copenhagen Center found that women in communication professions are 3 times less likely than men in the same professions to hold top management positions, and men dominated the highest salary brackets. So you're right. from the top. I mean, the data does show that in terms of research conducted by the center. And I think sort of, like you said, maybe you're not going to find out what everybody makes, but it's understanding that discourse and knowing that there may be that disparity. And as a female, I think too, valuing yourself and having the conviction to fight for what you deserve, if you might know through word of mouth or any other means that somebody who happens to be a male in the same position with the same qualifications is making more than you. I want to talk about, and we're going to just have you hold that microphone right there. You mentioned being a young woman, and the reason I want to talk about that is because we're talking about women, and there's a lot of aspiring media professionals, so students or young professionals who are looking to grow. I definitely can identify with that feeling of, we talked about, I think you brought up, Natalie, the imposter syndrome, and then those dynamics when you're a young female. So we'll kind of work backwards with this, but confronting male leadership when you're a young woman specifically, let's spend a little time on that.
So journalism is a bit dysfunctional. We can talk to our editors and bosses differently than most 9-to-5s. Like, we've been known to have like cash outs and things where curse words are let out. Like, we are not trained in any kind of realistic way to deal with like a more corporate setting. I am very aware that maybe some of the ways that I've interacted with my bosses are probably getting fired in other jobs. And the way that they speak with, like, and it's not like toxic or mean, but we're very blunt. And like, we're arguing with things, we're arguing about language. I'm like, leave it, no, don't leave it. So it's different in that way. And I've had a wide range of bosses and editors who are both male and female, and I've always felt comfortable to push back in that way. I think the scary part for me as a younger journalist was actually like when you're interviewing like the mayor who's like old enough to be your like, grandfather, right? And like, how do you hold, like, because in journalism, like I do watchdog journalism, you hold power accountable. That is scary, like to be a 21-year-old confronting the mayor about this thing. And I was like, okay, like I psych myself out. Like I fake it till I make it, you know, like imposter syndrome is real. Like I'm like, should I be in this space? Oh my God, I'm in City Hall. Like this is gonna be a big story. And so I think there was definitely, part of it was like who are you to tell the story? And I'm like, well, who are you not to? Like this is your job. Also, your editor is expecting the story, so get it together. But I definitely think when you're like when I was in my early 20s, first, like jumping into political reporting, there was a bit of intimidation to be in these spaces. But I just had to fake it. Like, you know, I would just like go in and, you know, someone told me like, even if your voice shakes, say it. You know, I think we're like always conscious, like, am I saying this right? Am I doing this right? Am I appearing right? And I was just like, F it, just do it. So just do it. Yeah. And I think that helped me get over it in general. And that was always going out into the community. Like, because anytime you have to confront someone with something or talk to them about these hard topics can be a little bit intimidating. And I will say, added to the layer of coming from an immigrant background where you are taught to be meek and humble, and you know, you go to work, you put your head down, and you just do what you're told to do. And that is not how the world works, right? No, and there are certain kids who know that from birth, right? That they get that certain unofficial training at home because their parents got it, and their parents got it. But if your parents never had it to give you, there's also this gray area that you don't learn in school. What does it mean to show up and shake people's hands and ask them out for coffee? What does it mean to network and like even have cards when you're 18 years old but don't have a job? Like there are certain things that like you don't learn in school that I feel like there are some kids who already have that advantage that I had to learn on the job.
Right. Natalie will.
Nadej, you make a good point. There's a lot of things that you learn at home. My grandmother went to school until the 6th grade in Honduras. And she was a single mom, raised 3 kids, and formed a business and accumulated wealth on her own in the 60s and the 70s in a male-dominated industry. She had a store. The store still exists. My aunt runs it, that sells textiles. My mother is also an entrepreneur with my dad and also owns stores. So at the table at home, talking to my dad about politics and talking to my mom about the business or fighting about the time I have to come back home from a party or what have you, everyone was the same. So I think that has helped me in the dynamics of being able to go up to anyone of any gender. My mom's very dark. My dad is very white. And obviously, look just like my father, although always said he wanted brown children, but all three of us are whiter than the clouds. But the color was not, there was no such thing, right? And I remember in England when I studied there, there was a young man from St. Louis, Newton, who came up to us after the summer he spent there and said, I don't want to go back to St. Louis. And we said, why? Because you guys treat me like I'm one of you. And I said, what do you talk? I mean, why wouldn't we? No, you don't treat me like I'm black. Black? I never saw Newton as black. It's Newton. And so growing up in a household like that has a lot of benefits. Now, if you don't grow up in a household like that, and maybe it's a household where as the girl you were in charge of certain things, but your brother had more liberties or what have you, that doesn't mean that you can't change route and say, you know what, I want to be an engineer or I want to be a business owner. I didn't see it at home, so you have to align yourself with those people that do. I think a lot of people will say, no, but that's not what I can't do that because I come from a different background. I'm not going to say the F word. I really won't get invited back, but F it, right? My grandmother did it. She certainly didn't see it at home, an alcoholic dad and a mom who didn't take care of her, and she accumulated wealth. And, you know, my mom saw it a little bit more. I definitely got to see it, but you can still do it. Did I answer the question? I often wonder if I go off on tangent.
No, you're there. You're there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think, Maribel?
I'm not going to sit here and lie and say I don't get nervous. When I first started on television, I wanted to die. I thought I was going to throw up. When I did my first live shot, I was shaking like a leaf. I couldn't breathe. It's nerve-wracking. It's the first time you're on television, and when you're live, it's even worse. So you're going to, for all those that want to be on camera, I can speak from my experience. Are there a lot of you that want to be a reporter on camera?
Show of hands.
Okay. You're going to be nervous, and that is okay. You're going to be nervous many times. Till this day, I still get nervous. But that makes it exciting. It's the butterflies, and I'm so nervous because I still love what I do. It's my passion, and it's excitement. It's a different type of nervousness than when I first started, that I was doing a live show, and I wanted to make sure that everything was perfect, and I wrote down what I said, and I memorized it, and it has to come out perfect. It has to come out perfect. You're going to make mistakes, and it's okay to make a mistake. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If there's someone that you see that maybe you look up to, or someone in the newsroom, you don't know everything. Google may not know everything. The man across or the woman that may be sitting across from you may know the answer. It's okay to ask the question. There's never a stupid question. I ask millions of questions all the time. I even ask my kids a question, something I may not even know, and I learn. So I always say, you're going to be nervous. It's okay. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. You will learn from it, and let's just hope it won't happen again. Maybe it will, but I always learn from my mistakes all the time, and I try for them not to happen again. But I learn from my mistakes, and I always ask questions. It's never a stupid question. I would rather ask a question off the air than go on the air and say something stupid.
I want to talk a little bit about presentation, and so much of how we show up has to do with how we carry ourselves and what we wear. I mean, when you're going for a job interview, when you're going to cover a major story, when you're going to be live co-anchoring in the field, what you're wearing on the camera, or if you're not on the camera, but you're doing radio or you're doing print or you're doing PR, how you show up is still how people perceive you. I think wardrobe is important, especially when talking to young women aspiring to work in communication, because personally, for me, for a long time, my first job reporting, I showed up to the newsroom in a pantsuit with a dress shirt and a belt. I felt this need to look super conservative, no jewelry. And I showed up for my job in Miami wearing a red dress, I think it was. And you see this evolution of me as a talent and feeling more comfortable embracing being feminine. And I want to talk about that because just going down the line, we got leopard prints and nice heels. We got some really gorgeous Gucci shoes here and a really bright dress. And then Nadee's just all done up over here. But I want to talk about this because because this is important. This is really important because we want to be women and we want to own being feminine, I think, and not shy away from it. I'm definitely guilty of feeling nervous about that. So let's talk about this a little bit.
I think there's a time and a place for everything.
Yes.
Like you are on the, I have been out on the field many times covering crime stories. So if you plan on doing that, dress appropriately. You're not going to be in stilettos covering a crime scene. You're going to be out there practically maybe 8 hours in a tiny mini skirt. No, there's a time and a place for everything. And again, it's visual. The way that you present yourself from head to toe, I think, is very important. Dress professional, dress who you are, but I always say there's a time and a place for a club, and there's a time and a place for work.
I agree. Target has a really, it's true. Target has an awesome dress policy. It's dress for your day, right? Dress for your day. It depends on what if you have a big client meeting, listen, to this day, you want to go to your client meeting and it's a show of respect. I'm talking about the corporate world though, right? That's the only world that I know, but maybe if you're going to a client meeting and you're an artist, we have to be as conservative as we can as we walk into the client meetings in our world. But they used to make fun at me at the agency when I graduated from FIU and got this job because I was in charge of making all the photocopies and all the clipbooks, and I was in a full suit. Like I came to work in a full-fledged suit. Like I'd spend the little money that I made on like rent and an Ann Taylor suit, and I had 3 of them, and I'd switch them up, and I'd have that same tank that guy made a comment on, but I had a few tanks. I always felt it was important to show up like that, but now the dress policy at work, you can come to work dressed. There's certain things no, I don't even think we have that anymore. There was like lengths of skirts and things like that. That doesn't exist anymore. But you can come, so our creative director asked me, can I come in jeans? I'm like, why can you not come in jeans? So there's a lot of flexibility, but it's really how you want to present yourself.
Right.
Right?
I'm of the mindset that y'all are grown. You know what you're supposed to wear in whatever setting you go to. Like every setting is different. Every radio is pretty laid back. I wear Converse sneakers. I get gussied up sometimes, but most of the days I don't look like this. And I don't think femininity is the bar at all, because I know that there are gender non-conforming individuals, that there are androgynous women, that I have a bald head, I don't wear ponytails and buns, and I'm also hyper-aware, especially as a Black woman, that how I look as policing has nothing to do with my clothes. So I used to have dreads, and people told me that that wasn't professional. I'm like, that's my hair growing out my head. No one tells a curly-headed woman that, oh my God, you have curls, it's horrible. And so I think we police women's bodies too much, and how we show up. I trust that as working professionals in whatever industry you're in, you got this, you'll have mentors, you'll have people that you can model yourself after, but I absolutely have 0 tips on what you should look like.
We're gonna open this up to some questions from the audience. There's so many more of you. So for those of us that were here earlier, we're gonna do that volume raise. Big round of applause for the panel. Raise it up. So once again, we'll have the microphone go around. If you do have a question for one or all of the women on our panel, please raise your hand, and we'll just go right now. So who wants to start us off? Right here at the front?
Me. Oh, I'm sorry. What you just said is really sticking. I can't get Madeleine Albright out of my head with her pin collection. You know, I graduated at a time where everybody who worked for IBM wore a blue suit, and I refused to wear a blue suit. And I think it's okay to be feminine in the workplace. I think it's okay to catch somebody's attention. You do it respectfully, but all of you look stunning, and nobody should make you not want to do that. Period.
Right. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to, there was someone else. Yeah, right there. Is that right?
Hi. Sorry, got nervous. Good afternoon, I think, almost. Thank you for coming here and talking to us today. My question is for anyone who wants to answer, because all of you did this, but what gave you the confidence to take the risk or make the decision to confidently ask for what you want in regards to putting your family first or just putting yourself first in your professional environment?
Who wants to take that?
I think I can start. Confidence is a big word. You see a lot of us up here and say, well, they've achieved X, and bet you they didn't have the challenges I have, or what have you. I've worked hard on building confidence throughout all of these years. At the age of 21, I was diagnosed with depression. It was actually the times at FIU, they had great mental health counselors here. I'm part of the Prozac generation. And I think just trying to get out of, I addressed a group of women from Dress for Success the other day, and I call it the Bank of Resilience. You think you're going through all of these things, and you're like, why me? But really, you're just building your bank of resilience. And if I were to answer your question about confidence, I built my confidence by having that huge bank of resilience of all the problems that you go through, because you build that bank and then you borrow from it. You've got, and that's the way you build, that's the way I have built confidence. Going through that and getting over it. And then the next thing comes, and then getting over it. I don't have any other sage advice other than that, honestly. It didn't fall out of the sky.
Anybody else want to attack that, or should we move to the next question?
I just think that, honestly, I think confidence comes with time. And in the beginning, obviously, of my career, I was not confident with myself because I was just starting. I was young. I didn't feel confident. I'm honest about it. I was not confident. And I think as time goes by, I faked it. I did fake my confidence. I did fake I was not nervous, but I was dying inside. I think, confidence, you build it, and overcoming obstacles, fears, I think that will make you more confident. In my case, it has.
That's good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Right there, yep.
Okay, so when you guys were starting your profession, at what point did you guys feel doubt in your knowledge going into the profession? Because there's often times where there's some stories that, you have to cover that you just don't know the background of. So at what point did you feel some doubt, and how did you overcome it?
So as a journalist, for the most part, I know nothing about most of the stuff I write about until I get to write about it, right? Because that's kind of what journalism is. You quickly have to become an expert at this thing and be able to, I knew nothing. Most journalists knew nothing about the Mueller report. Most journalists know nothing about the tax code. But there's a change in the tax code, you have to familiarize yourself with it. But I think for me, I came from a non-traditional journalism background. I wasn't even a journalism major. I got my job at the Miami Herald because I got an A in my professor's class, and he happened to be the investigative editor there. I had no idea he was a big deal. There's also a note to students, just be nice to your professors. You never know, they may get you your job. Because if I had applied for the Miami Herald with just my basic resume that I had written for the Barry Buccaneer, a few articles about fashion and why this school is like this sometimes, I would not have gotten a job because I was competing with kids from Ivy League schools. I was competing with kids who had been writing since they were 10 years old for their newspaper, and they had written op-eds already, and they were published in Vogue magazine. I didn't write a real article until I worked for the Miami Herald. But my professor went to bat for me, and this is where not just mentors come into place, but I call them navigators, not just the people who tell you how to do it, but people who walk you through the door. He literally walked me through the door at the Miami Herald and was like, y'all need to hire her. She does not come from any of these traditional backgrounds, but she's smart. She got an only A in my class, and I think she has something. I was just happy to have a second job that was paying me $8 an hour while I was in college. So I was the last clerk they ever hired. I just answered the phones, and I've worked my way up from being a clerk to being a full-time reporter at the Herald, never having a job interview there. And I doubted myself every step of the way.
Can I add that you are never going to know everything, right? You're not. And when do you finally know that you know everything? Never. And we walked into a pitch yesterday. We pitched a very big beer client. I don't drink. I get migraines from drinking. My poor husband. But we walked. I was nervous. God, we know enough about the category. I mean, I presented to the CEO of Target, Brian Cornell, a few months ago, just to him and his leadership team, Jesus, you would think, I wish at my age I still didn't have, but I still had my heart was beating here. Those people that have met, John Cleese, who's an English comedian, said that every time he went on to the show, he nearly vomited. He's like, why did I do this? Why did I do this? Why did I do this? I don't know, there must be a scale there must be those superhumans that before the big event, whether it's an interview or you're giving a concert, that feel, no, I got this. Nah, you're always gonna be a little nervous. And you're never gonna know it all. You just have to wing it and go in.
Yeah, I think so. Other questions from the audience? Over here.
Okay, thank you for this empowering presentation. My name is Widlo Menko. I'm from Haiti. I'm with the State Department for an IVLP program. My question is for Nadege Green, and it's simple. Because the minorities, there is not a lot of places for minorities in different organizations. Those who have the chance, or not the chance, but those who land a job in some organizations feel like they have some sort of responsibilities or more responsibilities to reflect their own communities or their backgrounds. So my question would be, can you expand a little bit on how your background affect your position in your job?
So on the one hand, I think the one thing that people thought, when I got into journalism, people were like, there were a few people who were kind of like, oh, well, she doesn't come from a traditional background. You know, she's from Miami. Like, people aren't impressed when you're from Miami, right? They're like, oh, you're from New York. Great, you're from this place. You told me you're from Miami. You're like, oh, you know. But turned out that was my strength. I knew this community better than anyone who could have came from Harvard, who could have came from Stanford. I knew the history of this community, so I knew context around what was happening around us, that I wasn't new to this. And I also spoke the language of the community. I was at home in Liberty City. I went to high school there. I was at home in neighborhoods like Little Haiti. I was fine in Little Havana. My godfather is Colombian and doesn't speak any English. It's really fun how we communicated when I was a kid. You know, like I was fine with the different communities I intersected with because I'm from this community. Like that was my badge of honor, but I don't think I considered that when I first got into this job because I was comparing myself with people with like these resumes and I was like, oh, but you can write, great, I can write too. But here's what I have that you don't have. I know this community. And I have access to this community in different ways. There are certain stories that people will talk to me and they'll tell you like, oh, I want to talk to this other reporter. And it's like, well, why is that? Because you've built trust in the community and they know you. So I think that has helped me. On the flip side of that, being of the community and often being the only Black reporter in the room also makes you like the spokesperson for all Black people. And that is exhausting. So can you explain this thing about Black folks? No, I cannot. I can't. We're just like this. I don't know what you want to tell you. So that part can be frustrating, you know, when you become like, when you're the only person represented and you're in that space. And we have we like to tokenize and ghettoize people, and I think that's across, like if you're Jewish, like, oh my God, it's Rosh Hashanah, you have to do that story. It's like you're Mexican, and it's like, it's Cinco de Mayo, who's doing the Cinco de Mayo story? You know, it's like, oh, you know, like we do this in the news industry, and it is to our detriment, and I hate it, and I push back against it all of the time. Because while I do cover issues that affect the Black community purposefully, like that is my intent. If I wanted to cover Veterans Affairs, I would. Like, I would not feel like I was pigeonholed to only cover one thing, but I think often in the news industry, you are typecasted because, especially when you are a minority, if you're a gay reporter, it's like, this is what you have to do. And I push back on that. You can do whatever the hell you want to do. You know, you can cover what you want to cover. But I think, so in some ways it is a plus. But there are times where you're just like, okay, like we're doing this. The microaggressions are real.
We got one at the front here. Yeah.
So I work with Natalie at Bowdoin, and when we were discussing what it's like to stand up for yourself when you're young, I think it's really important to think about who's in your corner. We recently hired a director. He had 15, 20 years of experience, And we were very excited. I was trying to get a new piece of business for one of our clients, and he was taking credit for my work. And when I asked him, hey, can you teach me this? He said, oh, but if I teach you, you guys won't need me anymore. So then I said, oh, this is who I have in my corner. I went straight to Nat, and I said, Natalie, this is happening. They spoke to him, you need to teach her. So he started sending me emails and signing professor. So I said, yeah, no, this is not happening. So it's really important that when you do face these microaggressions, you put your foot down, you stand up for yourself, and you look at the people who are in your corner. He didn't last, because that's just not acceptable at Bowdoin. It didn't matter that he had the 20 years of experience. We wanted this piece of business. She said, Michelle, you're the account lead. You tell me what you need and I'll get it for you. So you look at those women who can support you and who can propel your careers, because I've been with her, 2 years now?
Que aguante.
Que aguante. El mío.
No, but it happens with both men and women, right, across the board.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Another one from the audience, yeah.
Hey, I'm Daniela again. So I wanted to just ask a real simple question. When you walk into a room, in my case, I already know what I'm doing in the room, and I already have the purpose. Most people look at me and they're like, I don't know how I'm going to respond to this girl. I don't know what to do, what to say. She's intimidating. How do you respond to when people say that you're intimidating?
I think a few women have been called intimidating before. Yeah.
I take intimidating as a compliment. Exactly. Thank you. I'm tired. Yeah, it's 12. I know the time because of my brain how it's working. Sorry. Yeah, take it as a compliment. That's great. That's awesome. I don't see being intimidating as a crutch or something bad. No.
I told you the bit about ambition, right? I don't know if why are they saying that you're intimidating? Who are those people? That wouldn't be. And is this in a
For
give us a
example,
context? Is this in an academic environment?
I want to start a nonprofit, and it has to do with a lot of like grassroots, like groundwork that I had to start from, like things that nobody really talks about. And a lot of people say, "Oh, what? Like, how do you have this like big plan when you're just like sitting here right now? Like, you're just not really paying attention to like what's going on over there. You're just sitting here focusing on one thing, and then you go in to talk about it. Like, I'll go into my friends and be like, this is what I'm gonna be doing. And then they're like, oh no, I'm not gonna talk to her anymore because she thinks that she's too good for me. Or stuff like, oh, you're in over your head, or you're more like, get off your high horse. A lot of stuff like, just
Ignore. It's what I tell my 7-year-old when his 5-year-old father said, the 5-year-old father. Just ignore. You have to ignore some of that. Not everyone is going to understand where you're coming from, and not everyone is going to recognize your dreams. And there are a lot of like folks who will tell you that this can't be done. And I'm like, just watch me do it. Like, you don't really have to engage, right? Like, the best thing to do is not to engage and just focus your energy on what you have going on. And typically when I find when people say intimidating is that you're sure of yourself. And typically when that's women, the idea is that we're not supposed to be.
right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I tell you that I had a boss that said, Natalie, I've heard you are, I don't remember the word, a volcano or I don't know what. 20 years later, he was asking me for a job. Granted, I do want to tell you that there's emotional intelligence. You're going to work with different kinds of people, and you're going to have to adjust in certain moments. You're going to be leading teams. Someone might be more sensitive than someone else, so you learn how to adjust, being you. But hey, this person I can be more direct. With this person, I need to suavizarlo a little bit because of the way he or she is. That makes you a great leader, that kind of empathy. You cannot storm through your entire career saying, this is who I am, and this is how I speak, and this is how it's going to be. You can say, this is who I am, but you're going to have to adjust, right? Because everyone's very, very different, and you're going to need people to look up to you.
Right, and I think that's where kind of true leadership comes in, where you can also recognize and adapt in certain situations. Any other questions? We're going to get ready to wind down. Any other questions? We want to get them all in. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jordacia. I'm here mostly to get all this knowledge that you guys are talking about. I have never been surrounded by so many like powerful women. raising your voice and talking about what's on your mind, not afraid to say it. I'm not even a student. I stopped my education after I got my high school diploma, and I'm a singer. So speaking is actually harder for me than it is to sing. I would get on the stage and perform a song for you guys right now, and it would be easier for me to do that than to say what I'm saying right now. So my question is, how can I gain credibility and all of the things that I know and believe in and be able to share that with others?
So you're talking about sort of boosting confidence, aside from what your talent is, but being able to kind of hold your own in a room. Is
Yeah,
that what
because-
you're asking about, or?
Yeah, because it's
Okay.
like all about communication here.
Right.
So I think music is a form of communication.
Certainly, indeed. Anybody want to take that on?
I mean, when you say credibility, that's the word that stuck out to me, is you do the work. You don't become credible by just showing up, right? You have to have a body of work, whether it's in the arts. I come from a ballet background, so I recognize that training matters. You can't just be like, oh, I'm a ballet dancer. You have to spend a lot of time in the conservatory, train 6 days a week, have busted toes, and like have many moments, you know? But you're doing the work, right? Which is why when you show up and like you know, get on stage, people are like, oh, well, you're credible, because you've actually done the work. Like, the output shows that you've done the work. There are a lot of people who show up and they're like, oh, I'm this thing, and then you're like, you didn't do the work. We have a lot of interns, so they call me the intern whisperer. Some interns don't love me that much, but I think they will appreciate me 10 years later, because I tell them the truth in a very compassionate way, because they're like, they come in sometimes and they think they know what they're talking about, and they don't. Or they'll tell me that, you know, I couldn't meet this deadline because I have finals. I'm like, I got 2 kids, a mortgage. I'm like, you're not telling me anything right now. I'm like, and I have a fever. Like, miss me with that, right?
Right.
So my point is, you have to do the work. That's what makes you credible. People can see that you've done the work.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to tell you something earlier, but I was too scared. You kept saying that the glass ceiling didn't shatter. I think that's your perspective, but honestly, like, I didn't know I had a glass ceiling, and you totally shattered mine.
I'm happy to shatter your personal.
Thank you.
I want to see if there's any final questions from the audience before we wrap here with our morning program. Anybody else want to take advantage? Right back there.
Hi, my name's Tamika. This question's for Nadej. First off, I follow you for a while. Love your stories. Like Nadej, I'm so sorry, Nadej. But my question is, so like you've been in the journalism industry for a while, and you've covered a variety of stories in Miami. So how would you compare like the Miami market to other markets you've seen or possibly worked with in your?
This is one of the best markets to be a journalist, and you may, you know, the thing is, like,
I'll back her up.
There's always a Miami connection, right?
connection. And like, I feel like if you go to New York and DC, you really have to work your way up before you make it on the front page. You really have to work, like, you have to be there for a long time. Like, I was 2 years into my career in the Miami Herald on 1A uncovering public corruption because there's so much here, right? So if you're willing to do the work, there's so many untold stories in this community, and we're literally the backyard of Latin America and the Caribbean. So many of my stories are national stories that speaks to what it means to be the lived experience of a transgender woman who was, you know, held in Cuban pretty much camps because you identified as LGBTQ. And what does it mean to have that lived experience in exile here, right? Those are stories I get to tell. And those stories are national stories. They speak to a very specific experience, but they're just not rooted in Miami. Miami is global, and it's accessible in a way that I think the larger markets aren't because they're so saturated with journalists. So I think this is a really interesting market to tell stories because there's so many stories to tell.
Any other questions from the audience? We got one over there. He's coming. He's on his way.
Hi, so my name is Matthew. So Nadej, and I believe somebody else also mentioned being nervous before an interview for a story. Nadej, you mentioned with the mayor. So what sort of advice would you give about preparing for an interview, or just what what goes through your head right before an interview? What do you do to prepare yourself, basically?
I over-prepare. I Google people, I background people, I read everything anyone has written about you, I look you up on social media. I am a true journalist. I find out everything I need to know about you because you just never know. So I over-prepare. I think the worst interviews, the ones I don't like the most, the ones that make me most nervous, are man-on-the-street interviews. Thankfully, I'm at the point in my career where no one ever sends me out to do these things anymore, with the exception of election day, but I hate walking up to complete strangers. It is horrifying, right? Like, you're like, okay, that person. Like, I will literally sit there on election day and let 5 people walk by before I actually stomach the nerve to approach one person. Because it's always weird. And it's like, hi, my name is Des Green, I'm reporting with WLR. Can you tell me who you voted for? Like, it is, I hate now the street interviews. I think those are the most nerve-wracking because you never know what you're gonna get. But when most of my interviews are planned interviews with people that I'm reaching out to, and for those, I'm not really nervous as much anymore because I'm able to prepare, and I'm the one who shaped most of my stories. I pitch my own stories, so it's not a surprise. But I think over-preparing, actually doing the research and knowing the topic, there's nothing more offensive to people who will share their time with you is you showing up and not having to take the time out to actually find out about why you're there and asking them some basic questions that you probably should have known before you walked through the door.
I wanted to add to that also, being prepared. You may want to have your questions ahead of time, but also being a good listener. Listen to what they're answering, because from that answer, you may have a question that you didn't have before. And you're so concentrated on your next question that you're losing out what that person is saying, which could be an amazing answer for a question that you never had. So not only have your questions prepared, know what you're doing, research, but when you're there, be present and listen to what that person is answering, and not be concentrated on the next question. Because from that answer, you may have another question.
Presence, engagement, these things are so important and so vital. And thank you to each of you for taking the initiative to come today. First of all, to support the vision of Dr. Copenhaver and the mission of the Lillian Lodge Copenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication. Thank you to each of you on our panel. Our pleasure to hear from you. A big round of applause for these ladies. Maribel Rodriguez, Natalie Bowden, and Nadege Green, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.